But yeah, so I think we've compiled a bit of a list here that we can kind of talk through and have some fun. And I guarantee you, we're gonna upset some folks today. I can just.
Pat, one of the topics that I think doesn't get enough attention is radio. And I say that because in the modern age, we think of radio as ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's in our car, it's in the house, and we've got Spotify and things like that on the phone. Everybody's got radio and communications all the time. But the truth is, it doesn't really go back that far. As a matter of fact, it wasn't until 1936 that the government required two-way radio communication for instrument flights, just for instrument flights. And Piper Aircraft produced the last J3, an aircraft famously with no electrical system and no radio, in
Right.
1994.
It's been a while. It's been a while, but we've come a long way from the old whistle stop radios to the coffee grinders, whistle stop radios. You know,
Oh, yeah.
you twist the crank until the whistling stops, and then you're on the frequency. To where we are now with the I guess the 720 and frequency spacings, and in Europe now I think they've gone to even tighter frequency spacings, if I'm not mistaken. But I could be mistaken. I'm wrong often.
There's more people using the radio. It makes sense. But, we get into this radio procedures thing. You've got a radio in the airplane, you could use it. And in the old days, these radios were massive. They were tube run. They took high voltage. They were really a pain in the butt and took up a lot of space. Now
Yeah.
we have little handhelds and, digital stuff. But that doesn't mean we know how to use it correctly. And one of the things that I know drives you nuts, and it drives me nuts, I hear all kinds of things on the radio that are just somebody inventing some stylistic way of saying something. And it's like, there's already a glossary. We know how to communicate. Let's talk a little bit about maybe what you shouldn't say on the radio.
Oh my God, I could go on. I could go on. In fact, some of my friends just have so much fun at my expense because of these little pet peeves that I have. Jamie, I fly probably on the average of 500 to 600 hours a year, and a lot of that is doing check rides and still some flight instruction and things like that. So, when you're in the air that much, you're going to hear some crap.
Yeah, I think that's the technical term. Yep, crap works.
But yeah, so I think we've compiled a bit of a list here that we can kind of talk through and have some fun. And I guarantee you, we're gonna upset some folks today. I can
Oh, no
predict.
doubt. Because some of these things have become part of the lexicon and they're just used all over. And I don't know how they crept in. Of course, the big one is last call. You
Oh,
don't say last call at a towered airport. I don't know why people say it at a non-towered airport. It's not like somebody's trying to hunt you down. Do you hear that often? Because I hear it all the time.
I've got a friend that comes from another part of the country and has only been here for a short period of time. And we were having lunch the other day, and he said to me, and I don't know what we were talking about. He said to me, "What is with this last call business? I've never heard that before." And I said, "Well, welcome to Texas. And I understand Florida does it too, and some other places like that. And I don't know who started it, but it spread like COVID. And you hear it all the time now. And in fact, I was doing a check ride a year or two ago or whatever out of a non-towered field, and the guy said last call as we were clearing the traffic pattern. So I made a little note on my to discuss notes, and when we got done with, and he passed, by the way, when I got done with the check ride, I said, "So I got a question for you. Why do you say last call?" He said, "Well," he said, I want people to know that when I'm leaving the traffic pattern, it's the last chance that they've got to get in touch with me if they really need to." And so I said, "Well, okay. So when was the last time that somebody said, 'Well, wait a minute, Joe, before you go?'" And he
I'm
just
thinking that's a big never.
and he just kind of looked at me kind of sheepishly, and he said, "No, well, never." I said, "So what? When you hear somebody make a last call," I said, "Do you care?" He says, "No, not really." I said, "Well, so why do you do it?" And so I suggested to him, if you feel like you need to say something like that, and then I would suggest something more like, um, West Houston traffic, Skylane 6569 or Mike is departing the traffic pattern to the west. Done.
Yeah, that covers it.
It covers it. And at that point, you can go ahead and change frequencies. If somebody else said, well, it's because I want people to know I'm not monitoring the frequency anymore. Well, when you say that you're departing the traffic pattern to the west, you're essentially telling them that you're not monitoring the frequency anymore. So why last call has snuck in there, I have no idea. And we might add too here, Jamie, that the radio police are not out there looking. Nobody's going to come after you because you're using some non-standard phraseology or something like that. But I tell applicants and I tell my students and when I'm talking to other pilots, we can act and talk like professional pilots, whether or not we're making a living doing it.
Yeah.
And if we stay with tried and true radio phraseology and things like that, we will be treated with a little bit more respect from ATC in particular. So anyway, so that's kind of the reason that some of this stuff just pisses me off. Some of it just
Well,
makes me laugh.
I'll tell you, not to beat it to death, but I always thought of last call, and I talk to students about this routinely whenever it comes up. The towered environment and the non-towered environment aren't that much different. And in the towered environment, when I'm leaving, I'm departing the airport, one of three things will happen. I can call them and ask to change the frequency. They could call me and tell me it's okay to change the frequency, or I could just leave the area and now I'm out of their domain. But I never have to say, hey, I'm leaving, bye bye. Same thing at the non towered airport, which
Yeah. And
brings us to
well,
the
hang on a
one that
second
you,
here, because remember, you and I are both musicians, right?
yeah,
When we heard last call back in the day, what are we thinking?
very different meaning.
Very different meaning. It's like time for that last margarita before we go home.
Yeah, it also meant it was 3 a.m.
Oh, I'm getting PTSD thinking about that. Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. I will tell you the one that confused me most, the radio call that confused me terribly when I was new to aviation, is I'd hear ATC call a traffic advisory to somebody and they would say tally ho or no joy. And I had no idea what that meant. And I asked around to all these flight instructors and pilots, and finally somebody told me the truth. It means they used to be in the Navy. That's it.
Yeah, tally ho and no joy. You know, I get it. To some people that sounds kind of cool to say, but if ATC calls out traffic to you, there's only two proper responses. One is negative contact if you don't see them, and traffic in sight if you do. Looking is not in the pilot controller glossary.
Wait, I
Um,
can't say got him on the fish finder. That's not in the glossary.
no, the better way to say it is I've got them on the metal detector.
Because you said that's the better way. Somebody's going to go do that now.
Oh yeah, of course they are. It's just like one of my friends that knows how I feel about last call. We were flying in a conga line of a bunch of airplanes to lunch not too long ago, and we're going on a non-towered field. And so he calls up the Unicom and he says, I'm not going to say what airport, but XYZ traffic, Cessna 12345 is 10 miles north inbound landing. This is my first call. My first call.
Ever.
Just trying to tweak me a little bit, but anyway, that's beside the point. Yeah, looking or checking or scanning or anything like that. So here's the deal: if you see the traffic in sight. If you don't see the traffic, negative contact. That is all you need to say. Now, if ATC calls out traffic and you see them on your device, whatever it might be, it's still negative contact. ATC doesn't trust the device. They want to know that you have eyeball contact on that traffic that they're calling you. Now, if you say negative contact and 2 or 3 seconds later or 10 seconds or whatever, you pick them up. Oh, traffic AT, so-and-so approach traffic in sight.
Yep,
Done.
I've done that.
Done. And I hear all of, well, I've got them on TCAS And I'm looking. It's just not helpful, and especially in busy traffic around here at Houston, the Dallas areas like that, where there is an enormous amount of radio congestion. That is not helpful.
There is a phrase, and we have not rehearsed this, but this is how prevalent this phrase is. You're going to catch it just from my description. There's one phrase that's used constantly on the radio, especially when approaching a non-towered airport. It's actually in FAA documentation saying, do not say this. It's a pointless call. It makes no sense. There's nothing beneficial. Pat Brown, what is that phrase?
Any traffic in the area, please advise.
I hear it all the time, and it is an absolutely pointless call.
Well, you make fun of me here, but Jamie, if you look in this book right here, in AIM, notice these little purple things here. I actually tabbed that for today, because if you look at AIM 4-1-9, and for those that are watching, look it up, 4-1-9, paragraph G, it says that you shouldn't use that phrase under any circumstances. And not only there, if you don't believe AIM, look at Advisory Circular 90-66C, and it will also say, don't use that phrase under any circumstance. And I'll tell you a funny story. This is years ago. I was doing some flight instruction. We were flying out of a small non-towered field, coming home from a lesson. I'm in the right seat as a CFI, and we're taking off from this small non-towered field, and there was a phenom coming in on a practice instrument approach or whatever. It was a beautiful day. And here's the call, and this is not a joke. I'm not making this up. Brenham traffic, Phenom 12345, 10 miles out, inbound on the RNAV 16. Any traffic in the area, known or unknown, please advise. So not only did he take a stupid radio call, but he made it stupider.
Yeah.
It's not
I
even a
suppose
word.
there was no unknown traffic calling him back after that.
Oh man, all I can tell you is I so wanted to key that mic and make a smart ass comment, but I've got a student on board and I'm supposed to be professional. That's one of the things we're supposed to do, is be professional. But it was all I could do not to key the mic and just say something really stupid in return. So any
Well,
traffic in the area, please advise. No, 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 no.
I understand the intent of the call because people want to know what's going on at the airport. But the better way to resolve that is to tune in the ASOS or the AWOS and listen to the common traffic advisory frequency. You'll know the winds, you'll hear any traffic in the pattern, and you'll get a mental image of what's coming. And you can do that 15, 20 miles away. You don't have to wait till the last minute. So that call really is dumb and it doesn't accomplish its purpose at all. There's a much simpler way to do it that uses no bandwidth.
You're right, but let me clarify one thing. AWAS ASOS that's not the common traffic advisory frequency. That is
No,
the
they're separate things, but you can
right.
listen to the ASOS and AWAS and you know what the winds are and
Yep.
the density, altitude, and all that. And then you can tune in the common traffic advisory frequency and monitor that. And now you get a mental image of what's happening, who's in the pattern, who's on the approach,
Yeah.
what's there, or is there nothing going on? You can
Yeah.
find all that out just by listening. You don't have to talk.
No, that's true. And I tell folks that if you really feel just a burning need to key the mic and say something other than your normal position report, then address Unicom, West Houston Unicom. Cessna 12345 is 10 miles to the west, inbound landing. Do you have any reported traffic in the area? If now that works if you have an attended Unicom like we do at West Houston Airport, but oftentimes some of these small airports, there's nobody sitting at a desk listening to Unicom, doing other kinds of paperwork. And so your advice, just listen for a short period of time, make your normal radio calls. If there's somebody in the traffic pattern, hopefully monitoring the frequency and not making radio calls, that should prompt them to respond with a position report. If there's somebody that's in the traffic pattern at a non-towered field out in the middle of nowhere that's in a J3 with no handheld or anything else, no matter how many times you ask for any traffic in the area to advise, that person's not going to respond. And what happens if 5 or 6 people trying to be good Samaritans all respond at the same time?
Yeah.
You know absolutely nothing. So, but something, Jamie, it's funny. This is the thing. This particular phrase is probably will be the one that gets the most comments if anything does on this video. But it just doesn't add anything to the it doesn't add anything to the conversation.
Well, I will battle you on the thing that's going to get the most negative comments from people who are absolutely insistent they're right. And this is one of the ones I really hate. White Cessna. Okay, yeah, there's only 10 or 20,000 of those around. And I really hate that because the FAA does tell us specifically identify yourself by N number and type, not by color. And people do that. And this really gets me because I was once in a pattern with 3 aircraft identifying themselves as White Cessna, but at least a couple of them were instructional flights because there were 5 different voices on the line.
Right.
I have no idea where anybody is.
Yeah.
Whereas if you say Cessna 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Piper 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, now I've got a mental image of what's going on because there's only one of each of those. White Cessna, white Piper, whatever. There's literally thousands. And I'm in Florida, you're in Texas.
Yeah.
There's hundreds in our area.
Yeah.
That's not helpful at all. Please don't identify yourself by color. Use the N number.
Yeah, the N number is a better way to do it, especially with the advent of ADS-B
Yeah.
Now you can say, okay, that's that guy or that gal or whatever the case may be. Now, if somebody wanted to say White Cessna Skylane 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's not unhelpful. To say it more positively, that is helpful. You're looking, you're now, okay, well, Skylane, that's a little faster than a 172. So, okay, that gives me a little bit of help. Or Red Cirrus, November 816 Lima Tango, or whatever the number may be. Okay, I can probably see something red in the distance. And with ADS-B, okay, that's him or her. So, I can understand perhaps adding that little extra to it, but the call sign for sure.
Well, and for those who disagree, and there are a few, Pat, we're going to get some comments on this. I
Oh,
know it.
guaranteed, guaranteed.
Just think of it this way. We're talking about a non-towered environment generally. Would you ever call ATC and identify yourself as White Cessna? Would you call approach control and ask for flight following, just saying, White Cessna, I'm going from here to there at 4,500 feet?
Yeah.
They're not going to respond well to that. If ATC doesn't like it, don't do it in the non-towered environment. Use the
Yep.
N number.
Yep. Absolutely. Totally agree with that. Another one that gets me is when we're departing a non-towered field. And a lot of this stuff has to do with non-towered fields because that's kind of the Wild West of things. When
And
you're
by the way, it shouldn't be. It is, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah, I agree with you. But somebody's lining up or getting ready to take off, and they announce that they're well, two things actually. They're lining up and waiting, or they're taking the active. And if for somebody that says taking the active, my first thought is, well, where are you taking it? When are you going to bring it back? I'm going to need it here in a minute.
Yeah.
So when and the other thing too is if you once again if you read 90-66B, is 14 or 15 pages long, but it's really good reading. Never once in that document do they refer to active runway. They refer to runway in use. And so if you're at a non-tower field, and there are a lot of them around the country that have more than one runway, and when I say more than one runway, I'm talking about a single strip of pavement, because technically that's 2 runways, one from each end. But for an airport that has more than 2 strips, 1 strip of pavement, if you say I'm taking the active, what if the crosswind is such that it favors either runway? And you say you're taking the active. Well, that doesn't tell anybody on the ground or in the air en route coming into land what the runway in use is. So taking the active to me is one of those innocuous phrases that means absolutely nothing. And lining up in wait, which is not really such a it's not so much a phraseology issue as an action type of an issue. Lining up and waiting at a non-towered field is not a really smart thing to do, because even at a towered field, Jamie, you have to have 2 controllers in the cab before they can issue that to you.
Right.
So lining up and waiting, position and hold, which is the old way of saying that. And now and every now and then I'll hear uh, taxing into position and waiting. So it's
Well,
a combination of two.
that's one of those things that it is hard to get when you're brand new to this, but be specific. And I'll give you an example. I was once flying here, my home airport, Winter Haven, Florida. I love it, of course, proven by science to be the greatest place in the world.
Yeah, of course.
And we're flying, and I hear a call. Somebody calls that they're entering the pattern. They're over the lake. Now, that might make sense in some places, but here in Winter Haven, there are over 60 lakes, 60 lakes in town. This county has almost 700 lakes. To say over the lake is to say I'm in Central Florida. It's not very helpful. So we got to think about things like that. Is this call actually sensible? I've always taught this as, and it doesn't make sense to young people anymore. But in the old days, when we had a phone in the house, there was a landline,
Oh
and you
yeah,
would call the pizza place. You told them three things: who are you, where are you, and what do you want? It's
yeah.
exactly the same thing on the radio. Who am I? Where am I? What do I want? And I'm done with the call. I don't have to tell you my day's itinerary. I don't tell you who's with me. It's just a really basic call, but a specific call that other people can understand.
No, that's exactly right. And kind of along those same lines, if you will, when you're taking off at a non-towered field and you're climbing out, more over and over again, I hear that person on the climb out saying, "I'm on the upwind." No, you're not. You're on the departure leg. The upwind is the leg opposite the downwind leg. And again, I know you make fun of me, but if you go
No,
to
no,
aim,
I'm with you on this because the departure leg is here. The upwind is over here, a quarter to a half mile away. They're
that's
not the
right.
same thing.
And now there will be people again. There, I guarantee you, there will be people that say, "No, you're wrong." But I would say, au contraire, mon frere. Um, Go to AIM, go to 4-3-1 in AIM, and there's actually a figure 4-3-1 that says components of a traffic pattern, and it very specifically draws it out as the upwind leg is the leg opposite the downwind leg. And if you don't believe that, then go to the next figure 4-3-2, and it actually shows you the departure leg, and it's labeled the departure leg. Yet even control towers say that. There's a tower here in Houston that I do a lot of check rides out of, and the tower will say extend your upwind leg, and it's wrong. But it's almost like Don Quixote tilting at windmills. How are you going to fix it? But the problem here for me is that knowing that the upwind leg is the opposite to downwind leg, and having grown up my entire flight career hearing that, if somebody is reporting departing an airport but they say I'm on the upwind leg, my first thought is to go over there and look opposite the downwind leg, and that's not a safe thing to do. And so I think about, what about these pilots that learn incorrectly that that's the upwind leg, and they hear somebody that knows what it really is saying I'm entering the traffic pattern on the upwind leg. Well, now as that newbie pilot, let's say, I'm saying, how can he enter the traffic pattern on the upwind leg? That's climbing out. And he doesn't realize that he's talking about opposite downwind leg, which kind of brings me actually to uh, to staying in the traffic pattern. And oftentimes I'll hear, and these are students, oftentimes, not always, talking about they're climbing out, they're on the upwind leg, and they're turning crosswind, and they say entering the crosswind leg, and then they'll get ready to turn downwind. They say entering the downwind leg, entering the base leg, entering left final. Well, okay. I understand what they're saying, but think about the words that are being used. I'm entering downwind. Okay, if I'm entering downwind, to me, I'm at the 45 to the downwind leg coming in from somewhere, not on the corner where I would normally look if someone said I'm turning downwind. I'm
Mm-hmm.
turning base indicates that I'm at somewhere around 45 degrees off of the approach into the runway. Although that's 45 is just a recommendation, but that kind of indicates at least where to start looking. Entering base is okay. Well, somebody's doing a non-standard traffic pattern entry, and where are they? Because you hear extended crosswind, extended base, extended downwind. Some of these creative ways of describing where you are. I have no idea where to look if somebody's on an extended downwind. What does that really mean? Well, maybe 3 miles south, planning on entering the downwind leg would be a better way to say it. And I understand why people say things like that. Or I'm entering a modified base. Well, sometimes you hear control towers say that.
Mm-hmm.
Fly a modified base to, okay, well, that maybe just means we're kind of at a 45-degree angle to the final approach course or something. I don't know. I don't even know what that means when we're talking, even with a control tower. I don't even know what that means. So I guess at the end of the day, what we're trying to say here to our viewers is words matter. And we've said this before, words matter. Turning crosswind, in my mind, means an entirely different thing than entering crosswind. Turning downwind means something entirely different than entering the downwind. Any traffic in the area, please advise. Essentially, to me, means that the approaching traffic is putting the responsibility on me to watch for him or her coming in from, because they're not watching, they're asking for people to watch out for them.
You
And so,
know, no, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go
no,
ahead and
no, no,
finish your
that
thought.
was no, that was actually it. I was about to start rambling, and I appreciate your cutting me off.
It's my pleasure. It's just part of the standard service. I at the risk of divulging super secret stuff that CFIs don't tell people, I do tease you, Mr. Brown, because you are a genius and I have learned at your knee. But over the course of my career, I've learned two very important things that I really do take seriously. Sometimes I'm wrong, and that's okay because I'm a human being. That's the way it works. But I know how to tell if I'm wrong because I go look at one of those books that you have all the tabs in and find out what is the rule. What does the FAA want us to do? Go
Right.
read that advisory circular and figure out what their advice is, because this really isn't for us to just make up. And it's not my opinion or my thought process or, well, we do it like this at this airport, but over there they do it that way. No, there's a standard way to do everything. And it goes from how you fly the pattern to how you talk on the radio to which altitude you're going to be at in cruise. It's all basic stuff. You don't have to guess and feel unsure. Go look it up. And if you don't know how to look it up, write to Pat and Jamie and say, hey, what's the rule on this? We'll be happy to fill you in.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Because sometimes it can be a real pain in the neck to find the advisory circular and that's part of the problem too, is that God bless the FAA. They do such a good job in so many levels, but they don't do a real good job of helping you find some of these things that could be rather obscure. The new method for looking up advisory circulars and other things, essentially DRS, no DMS. I'm sorry, it's forgotten the acronym what it stands for, but it's basically a document management type service. Isn't a real improvement, but all of these things, as you said, Jamie, just to reiterate, everything that we're talking about here, it's all in writing somewhere. And if it's not in the regs or in AIM, there is an advisory circular or more than one out there that will kind of help give guidance and all that. And most of the stuff, if it's in AIM or an advisory circular or something like that, is not necessarily regulatory in nature, necessarily regulatory in nature, but it certainly is what has been deemed as good practice or best practice over the years. And there's reasons for the fact that it's been deemed best practice over the years. So, any of those folks that are out there that might be slightly guilty of using some of those phrases, we're not making fun of you. We're not. We're having some fun with the subject. We're not making fun of you. But I would ask for those that are listening, if you typically use these kind of phrases, just kind of think a little bit about it and really kind of search is really the best thing to say under the circumstances, and hopefully the your the response will be, nah, maybe not.
I think you've encapsulated the topic beautifully, Pat. I'm going to call a wrap on this. I say we move along with our lives, our viewers move along with theirs. Of course, after clicking the like button below, leaving a comment to let us know what they agree with, what they don't agree with, and whether or not they like your hat. And of course, subscribe to the channel, because the reason the channel keeps growing is because of y'all, and we really do appreciate it. It's just going great. Pat and I are smiling all the time, and we'll see you next time right back here on MadPropsAero.
Adios.